when running becomes a chore. I don't know, I've just lost my mojo for running recently. I'm not enjoying it. I don't feel motivated. I don't feel excited. It feels like work. It feels like a chore. Got to be honest, I don't personally feel like this right now, but I know I've felt like that a lot in the past. And it's something that I've heard multiple times in the last couple of weeks from our runners. And with the runners in our performance program, which is like our ongoing coaching where we're striving to get better performance, as opposed to like our recovery program, which is more like getting injured runners back to pain-free running. This is something I've talked with pretty much all of them about at some point, that they've lost their love for running, they've lost their drive, they're not enjoying it, and it feels like a chore. And while I do want to talk today about some specific strategies that I would suggest to help with that, the more important thing is to get down to the root underneath of what is driving you to run in the first place, because that's going to help you understand how to tackle this particular short-term issue in terms of like tactics and strategies. So the first thing that we want to do is reconnect to our why. And this is something that I do regularly, both for like my running goals, but also like any personal or professional goals that I have. It's something that I usually do in my head because I do it quite frequently, but it's also something that I can do sometimes when I'll write things down, either on an app, on a phone, like in a note app, or just on paper is even better. But it's just a series of questions. I think of it as the 3-year-old questions, where I write down my goals and then I just ask why, over and over, and just keep going deeper to help me understand what's really driving me to want to do these, seemingly random goals, right? Run a certain distance, run a certain time. Like, why do I want to do that? But then there's other goals as well, like personally and professionally, that I want to achieve. And I'll use the same exercise for them. Why do I want to do those things? And then just keep going down and drilling down further and further to really get a good understanding of what's the driving force behind that. So what I'm going to do today first is to explain the exercise, and then you're going to follow along if you want to as we're doing it, or you're just going to write down these questions and use them as a prompt to do, if you're driving or running right now when you get home. Okay, so the first question is just the what. Like, it's very simple. What are my goals for my running, health, and fitness? And we want to set this out into short-term and long-term. So to give you some idea, I'll go through mine as we do this together. So first, my goals in the short term. I want to do a 10K in under 45 minutes, return to the marathon. So these are bullet points, right? So I want to do 10K under 45 minutes. I want to return to the marathon next year. I want to get my body fat percentage under 15%. And then longer term, I want to run for the rest of my life. I want to run a 100-mile race someday. I want to complete a full Ironman someday. And I want to qualify for Boston someday. And none of those goals I've ever shared publicly or even stated out loud to another human being. So it does make me feel a little bit anxious to share them publicly now. But this is, it's going to be therapeutic for me, I guess. So now I have my what, okay? I have my goals. These are what they are. You might not know what they are. If you don't know what they are, then it might be worth just kind of spending some time thinking about that. Like, what actually speaks to me? What inspires me? And if you're training for a goal that doesn't inspire you, first you can do this exercise with that goal. But if you don't get anything in the subsequent why sections, then probably it's the wrong goal and you should look at something else. But it's my belief that we should always have some sort of goals, short-term and long-term, because as humans, we just do better when we have something that we're striving towards rather than some sort of maintenance type goal. Nobody likes brushing your teeth. Okay, that's a maintenance, right? I'm going to brush my teeth every day, right? It's not very inspiring. We do it because we don't want the negative associated consequences that would come if we didn't do it. But it's not very inspiring to us. So if we're looking for something to inspire us to run and stay healthy and fit and active, then we want some goals, and we want them to be short-term and long-term. So I have my short-term goals: get my 10K under 45 minutes, return to a marathon running next year, get my body fat percentage under 15, and then long-term, run for the rest of my life, run a 100-mile race, complete a full Ironman, qualify for Boston. Now I've got my goals. Okay, so that's the first thing. We're going to write that question. We're going to answer it in little bullet points. We want to keep this all pretty short for the time being, okay? The next thing, we're going to go a little bit further down the page, and we're going to write why. And if you need a little bit more prompting, you can say, like, why is that important to me? Or why do I want to do that? Like, where does this drive come from? Right? If you need to reformat the question a little bit, if you're coming up blank. So let's go through mine, okay? So my why, 10K, why do I want to do a 10K under 45 minutes? Okay, nice and easy. I need to have a goal for my current training, okay? Why do I want to return to the marathon? I loved marathon training. Why do I want to get my body fat percentage under 15%? I want to stay physically and mentally healthy, right? So staying fit and active, my body fat percentage would stay lower or get lower. That would help me stay physically and mentally healthy. I also put next to that, I want to look good. Ish. So I would look okay. So why do I want to run a 100-mile race or a full Ironman? So I love the idea of doing something amazing that I can't do now. Something that is really hard that most people do that I can't do currently. That's something that's very inspiring to me. So both a 100-mile race and a full Ironman would qualify. And qualify for Boston, this one's a little bit more external, right? This is more of an external drive than an internal drive. I want to feel like a good runner. I want to be perceived to be good at running, which is not how I feel currently. Okay, so now we've gone one layer deeper and our answers were still quite brief, okay, to that first why question. Now we're going to do another why question, okay? So with that 3-year-old, and we're getting deeper every time. So this next why question, we want to make our answers a little bit more free-flowing, a little bit more like kind of just writing out our thoughts, what comes to our mind, and a little less concise. And we want to go deeper. So we might use those additional prompts as to why. We might also look at why is that important to me? Where does that drive come from? And then we're expanding on what comes up first when we look at our goal. Okay, so I'm going to go through mine now. So the 10K goal. Why do I want to get a 10K under 45 minutes? First, why? I need to have a goal for my current training. Second, why? It helps me be consistent. And when I did this, I stayed quite brief here. And that's because on this question, I still haven't got any deeper, right? That's just all that came up for me. But we'll see where that goes in a minute. Okay. Why do I want to return to the marathon? First, why? I love marathon training. Second, why? I love the feeling after long runs, the idea that I can do things most people will never be able to do. I love the big project of taking 6 to 12 months to focus on and prepare for one single event. Okay, now why for my next goal? Why do I want to run for the rest of my life? I want to stay physically and mentally healthy, but why do I want to do that? I want to show up as the best version of myself for my wife, kids, family, athletes, and team. So that's the athletes that I'm working with, the team that work for me and with me, for our athletes. I want to set an example for my boys by filling my own cup first and looking after myself. I want to enjoy my life, and that means that I have to do the work to earn that feeling of feeling good. Okay, next one. Body fat percentage under 15%. Why? Because I want to look good-ish. Why? Again, I don't want to feel bad about how I look. So see, this one's a little bit different. It's not so much something I want, it's something I don't want. That's what came up for me. I don't want to feel bad about how I look. I don't want people to see me as someone who doesn't look after himself. That's what having a higher body fat percentage means to me, right? Someone would see me as someone who doesn't look after themselves. And that to me is not something I want. They would see me as someone who is lazy or lacks self-discipline. Okay, what's next? The 100-mile race. So why do I want to run a 100-mile race? And this one, at this point, I grouped the 100-mile race and the full Ironman together because I realized they're essentially the same thing. Big, audacious, long-distance events that take hours and hours and hours that very few people can do that I can't do, right? Like, so I grouped them together. Why do I want to do those things? I love the idea of doing something that's amazing that I can't do now. Okay, but why that? Why is that important to me? I always want to be improving in whatever I do, even if I suck at it. I just want to be getting better. Growth is very important to me. The opposite of growth is decay. I want to push myself. I want to see if I'm capable of doing those things. I admire the people who can do those things and I want to be like them. So now we're getting quite a lot deeper on why I want to do those things. And I didn't really understand this until I started writing it down, right? These things were deep down and I wasn't really thinking about them. But now I'm starting to get a better understanding of where that drive comes from that's making me want to do these things. Okay, and the last one, qualify for Boston. Why do I want to do that? I want to feel like a good runner. Why is that important to me would be a better prompt for this one, right? I don't want to feel insecure in my role as a coach. I want to feel like I'm qualified to guide runners who are faster. I want to feel validated as a coach. This is something I've talked about on the podcast before, right? I used to be a physical therapist and I moved from that into running coaching. The reason I did that is because I had so many problems with injuries myself and I felt like I was uniquely qualified to help runners who were injured or having trouble with injury get back to the level of running that they want to and then get to the next level of running that they want to get to, but to do it safely, with injury and repeated injury being the primary thing that's getting in the way or their primary constraint, which is why I talk about pain and injury so much on this podcast. But because of that, what's happened is you take someone like me who's a physiotherapist, got into running late in life. When I was very young, was not a natural distance runner at all. I was decent at sprinting, but I hated long distance running because I wasn't very good at it. And when we're young, we don't like things that we're not good at. So I didn't do it. Right. And then my whole life, like I couldn't run 3 kilometers without stopping for a walk break, right? Like I would sprint and stop. That's how I played soccer. But I got into running later in my life, partially because of that and partially because genetically I'm just like not naturally talented at running. I'm very average. Like my marathon time, my best is 4 hours. I just did a 10K PR. I'm 40 years old and I got just under 46 minutes. Like I'm really happy with that. But if you look at my age bracket, that's super average. I'm not a particularly good runner. And that, as a running coach now, right, even though I specialize in running injuries, I do feel quite self-conscious of that. When I talk to runners who are considerably better than me, and when I'm working with runners who are considerably better than me, I feel self-conscious about it. I feel anxious about it. I don't like that feeling. And that's why I want to qualify for Boston, because to me, that would represent being a good runner, not just being a runner, but being a good runner. And that, for me, is important because I want to alleviate myself of that insecurity in my coaching role. So that's where that drive is coming from. Okay. And then we're going to go further down the page and we're going to ask why again. And again, we might add prompts of why is that important to me? Where does that drive come from, right? But we want to know why, and we're going to go deeper again. So we look at the previous thing that we wrote, what I just read out to you there, and then we ask why about that, and we answer that question next. Okay, so let's go through them one by one. My first one, the 10K. I want to get under 45 minutes. Why? I need to have a goal for my current training. Why? It helps me be consistent. Why? Being consistent is important if I want to achieve my other goals. That's as deep as I got with that one. Right? So being consistent, why do I want to do that? Is just because I want to achieve my other goals, but we talk more about that in the subsequent points. Okay, I want to return to the marathon. Why? I love marathon training. Why? I love the feeling after long runs, the idea that I can't do most things that most people will do, blah, 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 blah. Why is that important to me, right? Life is about growth and challenge, trying to get better, to do more. Nothing in life worth having comes easy. Marathon training provides a backbone to my week as well as a big, audacious goal to strive for, and it has to be hard. And now we're really starting to understand why I want to return to marathon running next year. After a few years off, having had the kids, time pressures being a little bit more tricky. But now if I do decide that that's my goal for next year, I have a very good understanding of why I want to do that. What are the deeper drives behind it? And then at this point, I also group I want to run for the rest of my life and I want my body fat percentage to be under 15% because I noticed there was a lot of overlap with those two. And obviously, I wanted to stay physically and mentally healthy. I want to look good. I want to feel good, right? Why do I want to do these things? Well, when I looked at the prompt and then I wrote down, I want to show up as the best version of myself for my wife, kids, family, athletes, and team. I want to set an example for my boys by filling my own cup first and looking after myself. When I read that, what came up for me was I realized that I'd had a lot of, what I wrote down was, I don't want my boys to feel how I felt watching my dad this last 20 years. And that's because I realized when I came to this prompt, the reason that I'm so passionate about looking after myself, prioritizing myself, filling my own cup first, making sure I stay fit and healthy and run for the rest of my life is because partially I've seen my dad physically and mentally struggle in the last 20 years. And as his son watching him, I found it quite hard. And as much as I don't want to have those struggles, as much as I do want to live a healthy and happy and long life, even more than that, I don't want my kids to grow up and see me physically and mentally struggling and then feel how I felt. So it was actually more about not wanting them to experience watching what happened to me, which was quite surprising to me. And you can see it's a bit more difficult for me to talk about this one, right? Because this one's a bit more emotional, but now we're really getting down. Why do I want to run for the rest of my life? Now I have a very powerful driving why behind it. And then if we look at the body fat percentage, right? So why do I want body fat percentage under 15%? We've drilled down on why a few times and it seemed to be quite superficial, right? I don't want to feel bad about how I look. I don't want people to see me as someone who doesn't look after himself. But then when we got to this one here, I wrote this. So this is like the fourth why down the list. When I think of how others see me, I realize that it's just a proxy for how I see myself. And I want to respect and love myself. And to do that, I need to look after myself. Part of that is to see someone who appears lean and healthy in the mirror. So although it might seem a little superficial to want a low body fat percentage because I want to quote unquote look good, really when we think about how other people see us in our head, if we really think about it, there's a quote that I think is really stuck with me that I heard one time is, we wouldn't worry so much about what other people thought of us if we realized how seldom that they did. And what that means is it's quite obvious to me that I don't think that much about other people. Certainly, I don't really obsessively think about what they did or didn't do or who they are or how they behave. I mostly think about myself and a little bit about my family and the people closest to me. So when I think, how do other people see me, right? Especially when we talk about like physical appearance, really, I know what's happening there. I'm not a psychologist, but I understand that it's really me using them as a proxy for how I see myself. And that's why we care about what people think, right? Even though people often purport not to. It's just not true. We do care about what people think, but what we're often doing is like we're using them as a proxy for how we see ourselves. And I want to see myself, like literally, I want to see myself as someone who's lean and healthy and looks after themselves, because then I can read into that. It's a little bit like when you see someone's garden out the front of their house. Like they look like someone who's tidy, clean, organized, they've got their stuff together, right? Like that's how I see it. When I see, if I see myself in the mirror and I look lean and I look healthy and I look muscular, I look like I've got my stuff together, right? And that's how I want to see myself. And I contrast this, and I talked about this on the podcast a couple of years ago, when I gained a bunch of weight. I can't remember the exact timeline. I think it was about 2 years ago, maybe 18 months. And I'd gained like 30 pounds. I'd been very undisciplined in my like physical and in my physical and nutritional kind of habits. And when I thought about how I looked, and when I thought about quote unquote, how the other people see me, really I was thinking about how I saw myself. And I didn't like it. I didn't feel good about the way I looked. And I don't want to feel like that. I want to feel good about the way I look because I feel like that indicates how well I'm looking after myself, and I want to look after myself. Okay, and then the next one on the list, so it was the run a 100-mile race someday, complete a full Ironman. So why do I want to do these things at some point? Obviously, I've put these in a more of a maintenance phase at the minute, which we'll get to in a second. But like I said, I love the idea of doing something that I can't currently do. I always want to be improving in whatever I do. Growth is very important to me. The opposite of growth is decay, right? So I wrote these things. And then when I got to this bit and I asked why again, and I thought about it, I was like, I don't know. I think it's just how I'm wired, that I just want to be growing and I don't want to not be growing. I don't want to be not improving. And I can't really explain why. There isn't a specific why behind that. That just seems to be the way I am. And I think a lot of people are like that. I wonder if maybe even all people are like that. But that does seem to be how I'm wired. So that was as deep as I got on that one. All right, and the last one, why qualify for Boston? Okay, so we went through and we found some superficially sounding whys, but we kept going, right? So I want to feel like a good runner. I don't want to feel insecure about myself in my coaching role, right? That's a little deeper. Now at the bottom, when I thought about like, why don't I want to feel insecure about myself in my coaching role? I wrote this. I want to be able to be perfectly transparent about my abilities as a runner without feeling like a fraud. When I'm open, honest, and genuine about who I am, I feel calm and balanced. I don't want to pretend to be something I'm not, because that makes me feel anxious and insecure. So it's really about avoiding those feelings of feeling like, what do they call it when you pretend to be something you're not? Imposter syndrome. I had to Google it. Yes. So that feeling of imposter syndrome, the feeling that you are not qualified, that you are pretending, that you are being a fraud, that is a feeling that I want to avoid. But the reason I want to avoid it is just the kind of actual physical feelings that I get, wherever those feelings are. I feel anxious and insecure when I'm acting like that, when I'm pretending to know things I don't, when I'm pretending to be someone I'm not, or when someone feels like I am something that I'm not. If somebody comes to me and they think I'm a super good runner and that I've, qualified for Boston a bunch of times and I know how to make them super fast. When I feel like that, like I'm pretending to be something I'm not, I don't like that. I like to feel like I'm just being myself, sort of good at some things, not so good at other things, but transparent about who I am and what I'm doing. So now I can come back to the top of my list of goals and I have a good understanding of where they all come from. So now, having gone through this exercise, because I just did it this morning, and like I said, I did it again because I do things like this periodically from time to time. I might do them while I'm running and just do the why questions in my head. I might sit down and write them out. I'll do them for my running goals. I'll do them for other health and fitness goals. I'll do them for my family and personal goals. I'll do them for my professional goals. And this just asking why, just until you get to some sort of really deep kind of emotional reason can be a super helpful way to really reconnect why you actually do want to do these things. And so when you've lost a little bit of that love for running and it's become a little bit of a chore, this can be quite helpful because if you've picked the right goals, you should find some really big emotional drivers in there that you can reconnect to. And if you don't, then you've got the wrong bloody goals. You need to change them, right? You need to change them to something that really does drive some action. And we see this all the time in people setting goals like, oh, it would be nice to, be a runner. Like, how often do you hear that from your friends who are non-runners? I'd love to be a runner. That'd be great. It's like, yeah, well, it doesn't work like that just because you want something. It has to be something you need, something that you have a deep drive to do. So this exercise should be quite straightforward. You should come up with quite a lot of stuff when you do this. And when you do, now you've got some emotional drive, but like that doesn't mean that running becomes really fun and enjoyable and motivating again, especially if like the weather's bad, the time of year is bad, you've had an injury, you've just tried some big race to try and improve your time and you didn't. Like you've hit setbacks and that kind of thing. It can suck sometimes, really. But what we want to focus on is what are we doing this for? Like, what's our why behind that? Because when we reconnect to that, we'll be more resourceful. We'll be more willing to suffer through it for a time. We'll be more willing to, if you're working with a coach, lean into your coach, reach out, get some support, talk about how you're feeling, talk about how you can change the training. One of the things we often do, which I just did with a runner last week, is we just change the short-term goals. We kept the same long-term goals, but we changed the short-term goals and we changed the annual training plan to reflect that. And by that, we then changed the weekly training. So it became less in this kind of higher volume style that he was kind of getting sick of and more focused on strength, right? And that was just because that came from understanding what he really wanted for his long-term goals, but also like the why behind that. Because then you can really drill down and start making some changes to the day-to-day training. So if you're finding that when you do this exercise, you still feel very connected to the long-term goals and you have big whys behind them, then what you want to do is then look at your training and periodize it a little differently. So look at the training that you've been doing for the last couple of months. Let's say it was for a marathon. Then you might say, okay, well, my long-term goal, let's say it is to qualify for Boston. That's still my long-term goal, but I'm just really lost the love at the minute. So what can I do to keep the consistency, to keep the momentum, to keep me moving in the direction that still takes me towards my longer-term goals, but that doesn't have me doing the day-to-day things that I'm getting bored of? And that might be saying, okay, in the fall, rather than doing another period of higher mileage and then another marathon, maybe I do an obstacle course race. Maybe I do like a Spartan race or a Tough Mudder or something like that. Maybe I do some trail running instead of some road running. Maybe I do some fast 5K work for the next 3 months and really build my top end up. It still moves me towards my long-term goal by increasing my ceiling. Maybe it's not as specific and it might not be the most direct route to get there, but I'm still improving and I'm still taking steps forward. Maybe one thing I did, was it last year or the year before? I kind of lost the running mojo just because with the kids being so young, I was having a really hard time doing higher mileage training. And I focused on my strength and I just went for a 2 times bodyweight deadlift. And I spent like 6 or 8 months working on trying to get to a 2 times bodyweight deadlift and just built my strength right up. So there's different things that we can do to keep our momentum and keep moving towards our goals without falling into the same old training rut that's feeling boring and like a chore. So that's it. That's the exercise. I'll recap, okay? When running becomes a chore, or anytime you're trying to really tap into the deeper drives behind your goals, we're going to ask the 3-year-old questions, okay? We're going to start with, what are my goals, right? What are my goals for running, health, and fitness in the next year or two and in the next couple of decades, right? We want some short term, we want some long term. And then we're just going to ask why, okay? Usually 4 times is enough. And you're just going to reflect on each answer that you give. You're going to ask why about that and then write that down. And as you keep going, you're going to get more rambly. You're going to expand. You're going to make it more of like a train of thought and just kind of write what comes to mind, like I did today. And then once you've reconnected to your why, then you're going to make sure that you do have a big why, a big drive behind the goals you've chosen. And if you don't, then change them. And if you do, then you're going to look at restructuring your training across the year, right? So you're looking at the whole training for the year, and you're going to say, what can I work on over the next 2-3 months that's going to continue to move me towards my long-term goals, because they are still important to me, but that doesn't require me to do the exact same type of training that I've been doing at the minute that's feeling so boring and like a chore. And if you want some help with that, obviously we'd love to help. Just click the link in the description as always to book a call and we can have a chat about your goals for your running, but also like the big why behind them. If you ever do end up booking a call and you talk to me, directly, then you are going to notice this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep asking why like a 3-year-old. Why do you want to do that? Why? Why is that important? Why do you want to do that? Where does that come from? Right? And we'll keep doing that until we really understand where your drive comes from, what your goals are, and why they are your goals. And then it's just a matter about charting a path to get you there.